In society, people called him Handsome Signoles. His real name was Vicomte Gontran Joseph de Signoles. He was an orphan, meaning he had no parents. He had a lot of money and liked to show it. He looked very good, talked well, and was naturally elegant. He had a proud and noble air, a nice mustache, and kind eyes that women liked. He was often invited to parties, danced very well, and was liked by everyone, though some men were jealous of him. People thought he had many love stories, which made him famous as a single man. He lived a happy, peaceful life, feeling good in both body and mind. He was known to be very good with a sword and even better with a gun. "When the time comes for me to fight," he said, "I will choose pistols. With that, I will surely win." One evening, he went with 2 women friends and their husbands to the theater. After the show, he invited them to have some ice cream at Tortoni's. They were sitting in the restaurant for a few minutes when Signoles noticed that a man was staring at one of the women. She seemed bothered and looked down. Finally, she said to her husband, "There's a man over there looking at me. I don't know him. Do you?" The husband, who had not noticed, looked at the man and said, "No, not at all." His wife continued, half smiling, half angry, "It's very annoying. He is ruining my ice cream." The husband shrugged. "Don't worry about him. If we cared about every rude person, we would have no time for anything else." But the Vicomte Signoles suddenly got up from his seat. He couldn't let this rude man spoil the evening for his guest. It was his duty to handle this because he had invited his friends to the restaurant. He walked over to the man and said, "Sir, you are staring at these ladies in a way that is not okay. I must ask you to stop being rude." The man replied, "Leave me alone, will you?" "Be careful, sir," said Signoles through his teeth, "or I will have to take serious action." The man replied with a bad word, loud enough for everyone in the restaurant to hear. Everyone turned around to see what was happening. All the waiters quickly looked over, and even the 2 women at the cash register jumped up in surprise, turning their heads at the same time. There was complete silence. Then suddenly, a sharp, quick sound. The Vicomte Signoles had slapped the other man's face. Everyone stood up to stop them. They exchanged cards. When the Vicomte got home, he walked quickly up and down his room for a few minutes. He was too upset to think clearly. Only one thought filled his mind: a duel. But this thought didn't make him feel anything yet. He had done what he had to do. He had shown himself to be strong and brave. People would talk about him, praise him, and congratulate him. He said out loud, as people do when they are very stressed, "What a terrible man." Then he sat down and started to think. He needed to find friends to help him in the duel as soon as morning came. Who should he pick? He thought about the most important and well-known people he knew. Finally, he chose the Marquis de la Tournoire and Colonel Bourdon. One was a nobleman and the other a soldier. That would be perfect. Their names would be respected in the newspapers. He felt thirsty and drank 3 glasses of water, one after another. Then he started walking up and down again. If he showed himself to be brave, ready, and serious about the duel, maybe the other man would get scared and apologize. He picked up the card he had taken from his pocket and thrown on a table. He read it again, as he had done before, first in the restaurant and then on the way home under each streetlight. Georges Lamel, 51 Rue Montcy. That was all it said. He looked closely at these letters, which seemed mysterious and full of hidden meanings. Georges Lamel. Who was this man? What did he do? Why had he stared at the woman? Wasn't it crazy that a stranger, someone unknown, could suddenly change a person's life just because he decided to be rude and stare at a woman? And the Vicomte said out loud again, "What a terrible man." Then he stood still, thinking, with his eyes still on the card. Anger grew in his heart toward this small piece of paper, an angry feeling mixed with a strange sense of worry. This was a stupid situation. He picked up a penknife that was lying nearby and stuck it into the middle of the printed name, as if he were stabbing someone. So he would have to fight. Should he choose swords or pistols? Because he felt he was the one who had been insulted. With a sword, there would be less danger, but with a pistol, there was a chance that the other man might back out. A duel with swords rarely ends in death because both men are careful not to get too close. With pistols, he would seriously risk his life. But on the other hand, he might win and not have to fight at all. "I must stay strong," he said. "The man will be scared." The sound of his own voice surprised him, and he looked around the room nervously. He felt shaken. He drank another glass of water, and then started undressing to go to bed. As soon as he was in bed, he blew out the light and closed his eyes. "I have all day tomorrow," he thought, "to take care of everything. I must sleep now so I can be calm when the time comes." He felt very warm in bed, but he could not fall asleep. He kept moving around, lying on his back for 5 minutes, then turning to his left side, and then to his right side. He felt thirsty again, so he got up to drink. Then a sudden fear hit him. Can it be possible that I am afraid? Why was his heart beating so fast every time he heard a familiar sound in his room? When the clock was about to strike, the soft sound it made before chiming made him jump, and for a few seconds he had trouble breathing because he was so nervous. He started to ask himself, could I really be afraid? No, that couldn't be true. He couldn't be afraid because he had decided to go all the way with this, and he was determined to fight without being scared. But he was so upset in his mind and body that he wondered, is it possible to be afraid even if you don't want to be? This doubt, this scary question took over his thoughts. If a force stronger than his own will made him lose his courage, what would happen? He knew he would go to the place for the duel. His willpower would get him that far. But what if, when he got there, he started to shake or faint? And he thought about his place in society, his reputation, his name. He suddenly decided to get up and look at himself in the mirror. He lit his candle. When he saw his face in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Felt like he was looking at a man he didn't know. His eyes looked too big and he was very pale. He stood in front of the mirror. He stuck out his tongue, as if to check if he was healthy, and suddenly a thought came to him. At this time the day after tomorrow, I might be dead. And his heart hurt. At this time the day after tomorrow, I might be dead. This person in front of me, this me that I see in the mirror, might be gone. What? Here I am, looking at myself, feeling alive. And yet in 24 hours, I might be lying on that bed, with my eyes closed, dead, cold, not moving. He turned around and imagined himself lying on his back on the bed he had just left. He imagined his face looking thin and his hands limp like a dead person's. Then he became afraid of his bed, and to avoid looking at it, he went to his smoking room. Without thinking, he took a cigar, lit it, and started walking back and forth. He felt cold. He almost called his servant by ringing the bell, but stopped with his hand raised toward the bell rope. He would see that I am afraid. Instead of ringing the bell, he decided to make a fire himself. His hands shook nervously as he touched different things. His head felt dizzy, and his thoughts were jumbled, confusing, and painful. It was like he had been drinking, and his mind felt numb. And all the time he kept saying, "What should I do? What will happen to me?" His whole body shook uncontrollably. He got up and went to the window, pulling back the curtains. The day, a summer day, was beginning. The pink sky made the city, its roofs, and walls glow. The soft light covered the waking world like a gentle touch from the rising sun, and the light of the dawn gave the Vicomte new hope. What a fool he was to let himself feel afraid before anything was even decided, before his friends had talked to Georges Lamel's friends, before he even knew if he would have to fight or not. He took a bath, got dressed, and left the house with a firm step. As he walked, he repeated to himself, "I must be strong, very strong. I must show that I am not afraid." His friends, the Marquis and the Colonel, were ready to help him, and after shaking his hand warmly, they began to discuss the details. "You want a serious duel?" asked the Colonel. "Yes, very serious," replied the Vicomte. "You want to use pistols?" asked the Marquis. "Yes." "Do you want us to handle all the other arrangements?" With a shaky, nervous voice, the Vicomte answered, 20 paces apart at a signal, we raise our arms, not lower them, and we shoot until one of us is seriously hurt." "Those are good conditions," said the Colonel, sounding satisfied. "You are a good shot. The chances are in your favor." And they went their separate ways. The Vicomte returned home to wait for them. His nervousness, which had only gone away for a short time, started growing again. He felt a kind of trembling in his arms, legs, and chest, a continuous shaking. He couldn't stay still, whether sitting or standing. His mouth felt dry, and every now and then, he clicked his tongue as if to unstick it from the roof of his mouth. He tried to eat lunch but couldn't. Then he thought that maybe a drink would give him courage, so he sent for a bottle of rum. He drank 6 small glasses, one after the other. A burning warmth came over him, followed by a dull feeling in his mind. He said to himself, "I know what to do. Now everything will be okay." But after an hour, he had finished the whole bottle, and his nervousness was worse than before. A crazy urge came over him to throw himself on the ground, to bite, to scream. Night fell. A ring at the bell made him so scared that he didn't have the strength to get up and greet his friends. He didn't even dare to talk to them, to say hello, or to speak a single word because he was afraid his changed voice would give away his fear. "Everything is arranged just as you wanted," said the Colonel. Your opponent first wanted to claim the right of the offended party, but he quickly agreed to your terms. His friends are 2 military men. Thank you, said the Vicomte. The Marquis added, please excuse us if we don't stay long. We have a lot to take care of still. We need to find a reliable doctor, since the duel will not end until one of you is seriously hurt, and you know that bullets are very dangerous. We must pick a spot close to a house where the injured person can be taken if needed. All these arrangements will take us another 2 or 3 hours at least. The Vicomte said again, thank you. Are you okay? Asked the colonel. Are you calm? Perfectly calm, thank you. The 2 men left. When he was alone again, he felt like he was going to go crazy. After his servant lit the lamps, he sat down at his table to write some letters. He started writing at the top of a sheet of paper, this is my last will and testament. But then he jumped up from his seat, feeling like he couldn't think clearly or make any decisions. So, he was really going to fight. He couldn't avoid it anymore. What was wrong with him? He wanted to fight. He was fully determined to fight, but even with all his mental effort, with all his willpower, he felt like he didn't have the strength to go through with it. He tried to imagine the duel, what he would do, and what his enemy would do. His teeth kept chattering loudly every now and then. He thought he would read something, so he took down a book called Chateauvillard's Rules of Dueling. Then he asked himself, is the other man good with a pistol? Is he well known? How can I find out? He remembered another book by Baron de Vaux about marksmen and searched through it completely. Georges Lamel wasn't mentioned. And yet, if Georges Lamel wasn't skilled, would he have accepted such a dangerous weapon and such deadly conditions without any hesitation? He opened a small box on a table that held pistols by Gaston Renets. He took out a pistol and stood in the correct way to shoot. But he was shaking from head to toe, and the pistol trembled in his hand. Then he said to himself, it is impossible. I cannot fight like this. He looked at the small black hole at the end of the pistol, the place where death could come out. He thought about the shame he would feel, the whispers at the clubs, the smiles in his friends' living rooms, the disrespect of women, the hidden jokes in the newspapers, and the insults from people who were too scared to fight themselves. He kept looking at the pistol. He lifted the hammer and saw the shiny part underneath. The pistol was loaded, maybe by mistake. For some reason, this made him happy, even though he didn't know why. If he did not stand strong and calm in front of his opponent, he would be ruined forever. People would call him a coward, and he would be thrown out of society. He felt and knew that he could not stay calm and still. And yet, he was brave because the next thought that came to his mind wasn't even finished before he acted. He opened his mouth wide, quickly put the barrel of the pistol in his mouth, and pulled the trigger. When the servant, scared by the loud noise, ran into the room, he found his master lying dead on his back. Blood had splashed onto the white paper on the table and made a big red stain under the words, "This is my last will and testament."